And at first I was like, I don't want to manage. I just want to code and develop. Automation is a big thing, right? You could see the testosterone went down. Making sure that you bring in a couple of top level people.
Hi everyone, it's Vasil Soloshuk from INSART, and this is our Fintech CTO podcast. And we have a very interesting guest today. So before getting started, please click the subscribe button and like this video. Let's go. Let me introduce our today's guest, Ram Bajaj. So Ram has 25 years of IT experience in insurance, consulting services, software as a service, utilities, and biotech industries. And also Ram's background includes such large corporations like AIG and more focused insurance consultancies like Parent Knight, and also fintech companies like Checkout. I know that he was born in Canada, but moved to Los Angeles to be more close to water and mountains, and also to have warm weather. And also I know that he is a dedicated runner, and this is also inspires me because I'm also a runner. So this is what I know about you. And so what is your version of your story? So can you please introduce yourself?
So I was born and raised in Canada, like you mentioned. Grew up playing hockey. At a very young age, I knew I wanted to be in technology, and I started coding when I was like 10, 12 years old. And yeah, I took care of the high school network systems, built programs for them, and I, learned how to hack into systems. And yeah, just at a very early age, I knew I just didn't want to learn programming, but also hardware. So I did computer engineering actually, because I found actually programming easy. It was very simple, but I wanted to layer it with actually hardware and infrastructure too. So, which is interesting enough because as soon as I finished engineering, I actually started programming. But then as my career evolved, I layered that also with infrastructure and cloud and data centers and networking, along with developing applications and programs. So it was interesting, like how I started my journey as a young adult, not just wanting to code, but also doing building computers and building network cards, building motherboards and all that hardware stuff too. And then my career went back to development only, but then I actually evolved as a CIO, doing application development layered with infrastructure. And as we know, things are evolving again from application development going to the cloud, and now even infrastructure becoming as a code, right? So all the lines are now getting blurred between DevOps and application development and cloud yeah. So it's interesting how my career started when I was all the way from 10, 12 to now as I'm a mature adult, that how I envisioned my life to be and now how it is today, all those lines are getting blurred again. I remember like 15 years ago, it was a very strict, clear line, application development and infrastructure, right?
Okay.
15, 20 years ago. But now those lines are getting blurred, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because that's how I envisioned 20, 30 years. That's how I envisioned my life. And now fast forward 20, 30 years in 2020, we're seeing that those lines again getting blurred.
Before the interview, actually, I took a look how Gartner defines Chief Information Officer role, and they say the Chief Information Officer is actually somebody who oversees the people, processes, and technologies within company's IT organization to ensure they deliver outcomes that support the goals of the business. It was interesting for me. So, what the difference with the CTO role actually? And I also read something in Investopedia specifically. They say that Chief Technology Officer is the executive in charge of an organization's technological needs as well as its research and development activities, and he also examines the short and long-term needs of the organizations. CTO usually reports directly to company's chief information officer, but also he may report to chief executive officer. And there are a bunch of different definitions, who is chief information officer, who is chief technology officer, and who reports to whom. How do you see what the difference actually for between CIO and CTO roles, taking into account all your experience?
Yeah, it depends on the organization's maturity and direction, right? If the organization, so at a high level, CIO is in charge of all technologies, right, to support the business. However, the CTO is focused on very specific technologies on product development, research, and stuff like that. It's a niche within technology, right? So if the company wants to just hyperly focus in research and development, and they're putting a lot of dollars and emphasis on that versus a 5-year roadmap of how we're going to support the sales organization, a finance organization, marketing organization, operations and stuff like that. The CIO oversees all of that, but the CTO would not oversee that, right? But however, the CTO is an important role in organizations where they want to build a very specific go-to market product, right? And
Yes.
or very specific research and R&D, and they're and they want to be able to scale it and all that, right? So at AIG, we actually had the CTO report into the CEO and the CIO report into the CEO, right? However,
Okay.
in smaller organizations, maybe you don't have that, right? At Checkhold, we had the CTO actually report into my role, right? So, however, the focus did change at the end that we did want to hyper focus on the product, right? So we changed our operation model such that the CTO was reporting. So it depends on the organization's goals and the organization's trajectory, right?
Yes.
And it can evolve within a few years, right? So, um, I see the CIO role being a lot broader, right? Supporting many facets of the organization, right? Not just a product that they're going to the market with, but like I said, finance, operations, marketing, sales, and all those organizations that actually support the revenue and the customers and clients, right? However, the CTO is very focused on a product or research and development, just a very smaller niche, right? So, yeah, so that's how I see the differences.
You have a great experience in AIG, like 16 years, as I understand, and as I see your role evolved during the time. So
Yeah.
can you maybe share some some key milestones, how your role evolved actually, and also with the focus on how you were able to develop yourself in such a big company that
Yeah.
probably has multiple of opportunities to develop yourself. So how people can actually develop yourself in having that long career in one big company.
So there's multiple. I am heart of heart an engineer and software developer and a infrastructure person, right? I like technical, and it's very simple, right? You install an application, you build an application, you build an if then else loop. It's very predictable, right? And
Okay.
when I joined AIG, I joined as a developer, and what happened is that Y2K happened, and there were a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and our teams were growing. My communication skills, my managerial skills were shining in such that I was executing projects really well. And then my manager was like, our teams are growing bigger. We need someone to manage these teams. And at first, I was like, I don't want to manage. I just want to code and develop. However, I did have great leaders at AIG, right? And I saw how they managed and how they inspired people. So eventually I took on, a director role or first a manager role, director role, and then AVP and VP role. I was lucky enough to have great mentors, and AIG was growing, right? So I joined a small firm called Sun America in LA, which was an investment firm for retirement savings. And then they got bought out by AIG. And so I then took on a bigger role at AIG. And then within AIG, they kept buying organizations. And as they did a lot more mergers and acquisitions, I took on more responsibility. If you want to grow an organization, be ready to be adaptable, right? Ready to learn, be ready to learn new skill sets, and
Okay.
keep learning and keeping great mentors around you. And um, Yeah, I would say those are the few things that I would people should be aware of that if they want to grow an organization. Mind you, AIG at the time and up to just recently had great pension plans, right? So they have long-term incentive plans. They have career trajectory, career goal plans, right? So that helps employees stay with an organization for a long time, right? So it
Hmm.
builds trust, it builds value, it brings camaraderie, it brings you being attached to an organization a lot more than you see a lot more organizations now who don't offer pensions, who don't have good career plan growth for employees, right? And hence the retention is not that long. At AIG, I had a very, very low attrition rate.
Hmm.
And as I grew through the organization and as I grew through my career, my employees did want to come along with me, right? So being a mentor, being a great leader, and being a great manager is important, right? Because as you grow, you want your people to grow, and you want them to come along with you on your journey, right? And inspiring people and having their back, having their back when it's tough out there,
Hmm.
and making sure that they grow and making sure, what they want to do is also kept in mind.
Most important expertise that you gained in the big corporation that was most important for your role in Parent Night. So can you
Yeah.
name something?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So AIG has great processes and procedures and methodologies, right? So what happens
Hmm.
in a smaller organization like Paranite and Checkalt, they're almost like a startup, right? So they have no concept of uh, documentation or repeatability or what is an ITIL process, what's an agile process. They don't have those. What's a budgeting, what's even just a basic annual review, right? Like
Hmm.
employee reviews, they don't have those concepts yet. Some of them more so than others. However, so what I brought to Paranite and Checkalt is that maturity, right? That maturity of what large organizations are doing in terms of processes and methodologies, right? So that was
Hmm.
one of the biggest things that, like for example, a CAB, right? Change advisory board. Like as you move products through the landscape, dev, QA, like small companies are like, what is that? Just put it
Yes.
into production. Why even test it? Have the customer test it.
Hmm.
Not that bad, but just to kind of like hyper inflate what I'm trying to say. So, so at Paranite, I got them the SOC 2 Type 2, and making sure that and to achieve a SOC 2 Type 2, you got to make sure your processes are documented and then your processes are followed. To ensure your customers and clients are meeting and have the safety around your products, right? So to be able to ensure to get the SOC 2 Type 2, that's a
Hmm.
very heavy lift for an organization to make sure all your processes are documented and making sure that you're actually adhering to those processes, right?
Hmm.
Um, so that was the first thing I executed for Paranite, right?
Hmm.
Exactly all the stuff that we did at AIG, bring that over, document it, and making sure they execute. And also the other thing is that at AIG, I had a combination of app dev with infrastructure. So they wanted to go to the cloud and go to a data center, get out of the data center. So I helped them also go take their applications to the cloud and out of on like an office building type of data center, right? So
Hmm.
I had that combination also, but mainly I would say for small companies to mid-size, what I offer to them is the whole concept of best methodologies and best practices.
How you make sure that they are followed? Because sometimes you describe the business process, it can be badly followed by the people who actually are involved in these business processes. So what's your secret sauce here?
Automation is a big thing, right? If your processes are automated and simple, simple steps and automated, and then making sure that, for example, at Checkalt, we had a process for product features, right? So basically, before it was just everyone would send emails to, different people and
Hmm.
no control over that, right? However, we put a Salesforce process in where you actually put in your requirements for your new product, what features you want, what line of products you want, and then those features get reviewed and prioritized, and is so it followed a process, or like let it even be help desk, right? Before at Checkhold, our help desk was just basic emails to different random people, but we
Hmm.
implemented a proper service desk ITIL process, right? Which a lot of off-the-shelf products also offer, right? And we implemented something like ServiceNow, right? So
Okay.
there are a lot of products off the shelf that will automate a lot of industry standard processes, right? So
Hmm.
you don't have to reinvent the wheel per se, right?
Hmm.
If you are a long enough player out there, if you want to automate certain processes, there are tools out there to also help you with that, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? So you don't want to go out there and build things if you don't have to, right? And then once you do implement them, and you want to keep them very basic and simple, and not customize the heck out of it, right? Like for example, at AIG, we had many processes, right? Purchase order processes.
Yes.
We had accounting, close the book processes, right?
Hmm.
SAP has standard functionality in certain ways to do that. Now, if you stick to the standard out of the box, these companies will allow you to make sure that you're following the best practices, right? So,
Yes.
what I would suggest is look at the product vendors out there for the processes that you're looking to automate and
Hmm.
standardize, and see if you can use those into it, and buy them. And if not, then sometimes you might have to customize with certain tools out there.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's really save. I mean, processes automation saves a lot of time, and
Exactly.
you definitely need to select the right tool for that, whether
Exactly.
it's out of the box or maybe you can customize something a little bit and tweak to your process that you have
Yeah.
internally.
And you'll
Okay.
see when you do use out of the box or automate processes, your actual output of work, it's X folds increases, right?
Yes.
Your customers are happy, your clients are happy, right? Versus, there's a lot of startup organizations that at first everything is okay through emails,
Hmm.
but you can't scale. You can't scale on an organization, and there's no efficiencies in that, right?
This is interesting story about the large enterprises and like smaller startup-like companies. And I had many talks with some of our clients in which company it's better to work, like in large corporation or in smaller startup. And there is a variety of opinions here. You have the experience in both worlds, so what are the, I mean, we have covered something, but what are the major differences working in larger corporation and working in smaller uh, startup-like company? So
Yeah.
maybe what are the major benefits working in those two worlds, two different worlds?
Yeah. So where I saw big organizations, as an employee, you'll get very specialized in one field, right? Because if you're doing SAP or if you're doing networking, you will get a lot of depth in that technology,
Hmm.
and you go very deep, right?
Okay.
However, in a smaller organization, you'll get a lot of more breadth. You'll work on, buildings, infrastructure, but then you might be coding also. You might be doing security also a little bit. You'll get a wide breadth, but you won't get the depth that you would as a large organization,
Hmm.
right? Um, in a large organization, you can move around a lot more and still get the depth, right? So you can become an application developer, which I was. Then I went into infrastructure and I got that depth also, right? In a smaller organization, there's not much lateral movement, right? It's just one group basically in IT, and right. It's like you can change what you're doing day to day, majority of it, but you will never get the depth as you will as in a large organization. Also, in a large organization, you'll get to work with a lot more products, right? And maybe more of the high end products, right? Like ServiceNow or like SAP. In a smaller organization, you might use, Power BI and Microsoft, or like little lower versions, or you might use Quicken Books for accounting, right? Versus
Yes.
maybe the higher end products, right? So however, the business processes will probably be the same across, putting in accounting, entry versus in QuickBooks versus SAP. However, you will not probably get exposure to those higher end products, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that maybe as a developer, for example, you probably, you could be doing .NET in one organization and .NET in another organization, right? But maybe the scale isn't there, right? So, AIG, we had hundreds of millions of customers. So you have to think of scale, right, as you develop a
Mm-hmm.
product, right? In a smaller organization, you may have thousands of customers and clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you might not have to think about scale. So I would say if I was mentoring someone, I would say go to a large organization first if
Mm-hmm.
you can, so you can move
Okay.
around. You can move
Yeah.
around and get the depth. However, but you better be sure of what you want to start with, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're
Mm-hmm.
totally not sure of what you want to do, then go to a small organization because you'll be able to do a lot of different things, right? But if you're sure you just want to code and you want to just develop applications, then go to a large organization. But maybe you don't know you don't know if you want to do infrastructure, you don't know if you want to develop, and maybe you like to do
Mm-hmm.
both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then go to a smaller organization, right? Um, However, I think you might pick up some bad habits if you go to a small organization,
Okay.
right? Because the processes aren't as well developed. In a larger organization, you'll have frameworks to follow, right? And
Yeah.
methodology. But however, you be clear that you will be just doing that one thing, right? And you better be okay with that. But if you're
Okay.
unsure about what you want to do and you want to do a lot of different things, you
Mm-hmm.
want to build your infrastructure in the cloud, plus you want to develop, plus you want to do
Yes.
security, then go into a smaller organization. But
Okay.
if you know you're not going to want to do security and infrastructure and you just want to develop, then go into a larger organization. And because you'll be stuck in that group for a while till you be able to move to another group,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not super easy to move to different organizations within large organizations. They try to make it easy, but sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
not that easy, right? So yeah, there's pros and cons to both sides, like I think what you're alluding to, right?
I read on the checkout website that, I mean, some of your quotes, with the diversity comes different ideas, different beliefs, different work patterns, and you need this. In practice, how does the diversified environment do you think help in your job, in your workplace? And what is the most powerful thing about it? What do you think?
I remember I was in a group and at the CIO level and VP level, and it was all males, right? And
Okay.
And I remember us all talking over each other, right? Like a
Okay.
lot of alpha males, right? And no one was hearing anything. No one was understanding. No one was trying to see what the other individual. We were all trying to prove our points. A year after that, we got a female CIO, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
got some females and some yeah, people of color in our group too. You could see the testosterone went down, and the estrogen was up, and us men and women were respecting each other because there were just women present now, right, in our group, and we were actually hearing what the other individuals were saying and working together and collaborating and just the whole energy changed, of the group, how we interacted. We were more respectful. We were trying to listen more, and that was just because there were women now in the group, right? And they offered a different type of energy, right, or a different
Mm-hmm.
type of compassion or understanding, right? And that's what comes with diversity. Other people's ideas, other people's viewpoints. And it just changes the whole dynamics when you have diversity, right? For the better,
Yes.
right? And I'm a big component of, like at Checkhold, I made sure that we had women engineers, we had women developers, we had women QA people, we had women, you know, and and even different diversity of age, people with, long
Mm-hmm.
tenure, short tenure, and people even with what was also interesting is about diversity is not just, race and gender and age and stuff like that, diversity, also in people's work habits, I feel is a
Mm-hmm.
diversity. We need that too. I remember when creating teams at AIG, which was really interesting. I was like, I'm going to get the smartest developers out there. And,
Okay.
and I was like, no, that's not what I need to do. I need to find developers who are seasoned. I want some weak developers. I want some strong developers. I want some average developers. Because what ends up happening, or different types of personality of developers, right? Because what I found was interesting is that those great developers, they're very egotistical. My
Okay.
code is best. I look at this, the way I've written this code, how I did it in 2 lines. The other guy's like, I did it in 1 line. The other guy's like, oh man, I did it in 4 lines. And it's just this competition, and it's not healthy because competition is healthy to a point, but not to the point
Hmm.
where we're overstepping other people and we're disrespecting people and we're not being compassionate. And I found that if I hired developers that are not as strong, they're learning from the stronger developers, right? And
Hmm.
they're raising their game, and there's not this competition of my code's better than, because we're all a team at the end of the day, right? We all want to work
Yes.
together, right? And when you have unhealthy competition, that's not good, right? And so what I found was that having people who like to work at nights or who like to do operations, who like to tune code versus write code, and build. So like when you're building a football team, right? You don't hire all
Hmm.
quarterbacks, right? You have some
Yeah.
great defense people, you have great offense people, you have a quarterback, you have, a kicker, you have all these different players, right? And that's how you build a successful NFL championship team, right? And that's how I
Yes. Yes.
vision building my teams, right? To have this diversity of women, male, gender and ethnicity and stuff like that, but then also capabilities. I think it's very important to have diversity and capabilities too, and I don't think a lot of people think about that. And
Hmm.
and I know I had to learn hard way because I used to hire just the smartest engineers, and then what I realized is that the team is not gelling. The team is not
Hmm.
not working together. They're all like working against each other about, my thing is better, and we need to do it my way, and it's unhealthy.
Okay.
And so,
Got
yeah, I
it.
like to build strong NFL championship teams by having great diversity. Yeah.
I think you know. So there is a project of WASP Top 10, and I take. I mean, before the interview, I took a look. What are the major security risks so far identified for 2021? So probably there will be some changes in 2022. And they have also some predictions over there, what will happen with each of the with each of these potential risks that the organization experiences. Yeah, but all the organizations are different. So, and my question is, so which vulnerability do you think is the most important, and in coming year, uh, taking into account your situation, your experience? So, what do you think?
Yeah. I Since everything is becoming like a SaaS model and a cloud model, what I'm finding is that the access in these cloud models are sometimes too much. Or if they're too much, there's no segregation of duty basically. When you were on-prem, and it was a monolithic applications like SAP or Oracle and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
it was easy to control the access and making sure that there's no segregation, there's no duplicate access or over provisioned access, right?
Hmm.
Now with everything going to the cloud and everything becoming a microservice, and let it be, Salesforce in the cloud, ServiceNow in the cloud, what have you not in the cloud, right? Um, it's becoming very difficult to make sure that there's no segregation of duty, and it's not over provisioned. And then when employees leave, that provision is not all terminated across all these different cloud applications, right? So broken access control in my mind is a big thing that's I think in 2022 and 2021 that's happening, and then being able to a lot of employees and clients want zero friction, right? They want to be able to um, access applications everywhere and anywhere, right? Before, when applications were on-prem, a lot of them, or it was easier to control that access, right? Now people want to access on, their mobile device, their personal device, or if they go to a hotel, they want to be able to access their applications, and
Right.
how do we secure those applications, access of that, and still provide zero friction to the end user, right?
Right.
So as a lot of people turn on these applications, and their business units who are turning on these applications, right? Let it be,
Mm-hmm.
they call it shadow IT and stuff like that. They're spinning up Salesforces, they're spinning up Power BIs, and injecting all this data in all these applications in the cloud. And now, how do the CIO or the CTO or the security person make sure that access is not over provisioned, or that data hasn't left your organization and gone to the cloud, and then there's this data out there in these cloud applications that our employees or customers or clients don't have access to, right? And so I think of that all as broken access control, right? I think that's a big you know big piece of it, right? Also, like I saw cryptography. Our cryptography is
Yes.
changing all the time. Like with these supercomputers now being able to break these tokens and passwords, and try all these permutation combinations, and all this cryptography levels are changing. And yeah, so larger keys are always needed, right? So with these supercomputers,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, it was interesting. Like just a couple weeks ago, we were doing DevOps with Azure DevOps with Microsoft,
Okay.
um, and we got a pop up that TLS 1.0 was being turned off, and I was like,
Oh, really?
1.0. I was like, Microsoft using TLS 1.0 still? Yeah,
Okay.
it was like 2 weeks ago, right? So, or 3 weeks ago, they're still trying to shut off TLS 1.0, right? So, which most organizations are, or maybe it was 1.1, most organizations are 1.2, 1.3 a few years ago, right? So, large corporations, or, organizations that are complex, and they have a lot of applications, or very complex organizations, hundreds and millions of servers and applications, it's difficult for them to keep up with their cryptography, right? Making sure that they're on the latest TLS version, or latest security patches, and large, um, because as we do microservices, as we do, have these plethora of applications, and the complexity of the applications, it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to maintain the security levels and patching, and making sure that you're using the right cryptography in your applications, because it just becomes a lot more complex to maintain, right? At Checkle, what we did is we made sure that we're patching on a monthly basis. We're patching the servers, we're patching the applications, we're making sure that third-party applications, OSs are patches, but as endpoints are patched, right? But then you have these hackers out there, and these requirements every day. The goalpost is changing, right? And how do you
Mm-hmm.
stay on top of that, right? How do you stay on top of maintaining that? All while building products for the customer, and getting revenue, right, for the organization, right, and keeping them safe at the same time.
I watched a panel discussion with you named "Improve Customer Loyalty with Payments Data," and
Yeah,
there you mentioned also that dealing with the security improvements, you
yeah.
need to remove the heaviest bag first.
Yeah.
So, what was the most heaviest security bag that you were able to remove?
PCI is a very big burden for a lot of organizations, right? Credit card or PAN data. And when it first came out, PCI 1.0, I think they're on PCI 4 now or something like that. It used to
Mm-hmm.
be like 50 pages of requirements. Now there's 700 pages of requirements,
Yes.
you know?
Okay.
So the burden is very heavy on any organization that's processing credit cards.
Mm-hmm.
And that burden means making sure you're patching, making sure your security access is being reviewed, all this stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what there's this concept called network tokenization, basically tokenizing um, information before it actually hits your organization. Because for large organizations or even small organizations that have been there for a long time, they have tech debt, right? And tech debt basically then
Yeah.
what happens is that you got to make sure you're maintaining, your systems, and that comes
Mm-hmm.
at a cost, right? So what I did at Checkhold was to make sure that basically we don't get the credit card in our organization, right? Or
Okay.
basically don't have that data even at all, right? Because once you have data, then you're liable for that data. So what we did was we used the concept of network tokenization. So basically
Okay.
before offboarded that burden to another organization, basically, and they tokenize it, and we only store the token. So basically that burden of that data is now removed, right? Because we don't have that data. So the CDE network card data environment now is not applicable to the organization because that is offloaded now to another organization that now holds the burden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously they have to now make sure they're following the 700 pages of PCI requirements. So the biggest burden that so I didn't address the tech debt. I somehow
Mm-hmm.
figured out a solution to basically avoid those requirements for that organization. So,
Okay.
um, so because if we had to address it, it was going to be a lot heavier lift, eh,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So, for the time frame for the biggest bang for the buck, I figured a way to basically, and that's the CIO's job. The CIO's job is to make sure we figure out the best possibility of technology at
Mm-hmm.
the best price and the best way to do it, right? For the business, right? Because to take on an endeavor to basically meet the PCI requirements would have taken millions and millions of dollars, and it would have taken several years to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus this project or this technology or this way of doing it, we did it within a months, right? And fraction of the amount of money. And at the same time, we still not liable or we don't have that data. So that's the CIO's responsibility, right? To find the best possible way of technology to basically enable the business to run the business, right? And
Yeah.
maintain this, right? Um, and that's where my specialty comes, right? My specialty comes understanding the different options that organizations may need to execute to basically run the business, right? Let
Mm-hmm.
it and the operations, right? So and making sure that all our partners get on board with it. Let it be the CTO, let it be the CFO for funding, let it be the product marketing to basically communicate because the URL was changing. Like making sure all those organizations get on board and basically kind of push this forward, right?
When you scale your software product, so actually the IT infrastructure cost skyrockets, to the moon. And actually, this is what you're talking about. Yeah, so you need
Yeah.
to keep your IT infrastructure cost optimized. The question is, so do you think that you can optimize IT costs and also improve cybersecurity at the same time? Because to improve the cybersecurity, you need also to spend to invest into this. So what's your strategies here? How to keep IT infrastructure optimized from the cost perspective, but also continuously improve your security?
You got to upgrade your applications, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
upgrade your applications, like containerize it, right? So let's back up. Back in the
Okay.
day, everything was physical hardware, right? Your application
Yes.
sat on actual physical hardware, right? Then, which had physical CPUs, had physical, you had several servers, and on the several servers, the application sat, and it was all physical hardware, right? Then
Yes.
we went
Yes.
to, but still you had the operating system, you had the hardware, and then you had the application sitting on the hardware, right? Then we went to virtualization, right? Basically now you have a couple of hosts and you have hundreds of VMs, and now you have applications sitting on these and you can vMotion and keep your applications up, and it's all virtual, right? You can bring them up, bring them down, you can create them very fast, you can add more hosts and still add more virtual servers. So you have these now applications sitting in these virtual environments, right? Virtual machines. And then you went to, the container and the cloud, right? So basically, you've abstracted the layer now of your application and your OS, and basically now you can you can have your application not be dependent on any OSs now too, right? Or if you upgrade your OS and your applications don't get affected, and you can have multiple applications on these container based, right? However, what I've noticed is that the .NET framework, you got to have to a certain level to be able to now leverage containers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just do a lift and shift. And just like how it wasn't easy to move to physical to virtual. You actually had to tweak the applications, right? To take advantage of the virtual environment, right? And now to go
Okay.
from the virtual environment to go to the containers, you again have to modify your applications to a standard where you can now leverage containers, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
be able to optimize your question about infrastructure, you got to
Mm-hmm.
optimize and making sure that your applications also are optimized to a way that you can take advantage of those infrastructures, right? For example, like what's the benefit of a cloud? The benefit of the cloud is elasticity, right? To be able to scale out and scale back down, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do that, your applications have to be able to expand out and in, right? So what does that mean? You got to make sure your applications are sometimes sessionless, right? Or have sessions such that, when they do expand, your applications now can take in more requests. So your application should be able to handle that, right? And that's how you take care of the elasticity, right? To be able to expand and collapse, right? Um, and basically, then you've minimized your hardware infrastructure cost because your applications can expand and collapse, right? But if your applications can't do that, then you can't really take advantage of that. If your applications can't be containerized, then you're not
Mm-hmm.
taking advantage of the container technology, right? So, so I think it's not just infrastructure, and that's the beauty again about the CIO, right? Because you're marrying the applications because you understand the applications have to be retrofitted or developed in containers or developed cloud first to be able to take advantage of the new infrastructure cost benefits, right? So it's not easy
Okay.
to say to, oh, and then then the security aspect. I think what you're also asking is, so the first aspect is how do you optimize infrastructure costs, right? The only
Mm-hmm.
way to optimize infrastructure cost, the best way is to make sure applications can also take advantage because the applications have to sit on the infrastructure, right? So
Okay.
you have to fix or retrofit your applications. When you're building new on a new infrastructure, you can take advantage of that very easily, right? Because you're starting fresh. Uh,
Yes. Okay.
but when you have old legacy applications or current applications, I don't think you have to sprinkle some of security improvements and infrastructure improvements and application. You can do both, but it's like time slicing. You only have $100. You can spend 20 on security improvements, maybe 30 on infrastructure and some on application, right? So I don't think so you got to choose your poison, right? I don't think
Mm-hmm.
you have to spread your dollars or resources, right? You got to do you got to do the critical security improvements. You have to do those, right?
Okay.
Like the SEV 0, SEV 1 criticality vulnerabilities, right? At the same time, you do want to invest in your infrastructure improvements and cost improvements, but then you also have to invest in your applications and making sure that they get up to date, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so you can't just do one, you have to do all, right? But mind you have only a certain amount of resources, right? As most organizations, and you got to pick your poison, right? You can't just focus
Yes.
on
Yes.
security because then the underlying infrastructure is going to fall apart. You can't just do infrastructure because your application tuning or your application product features are not going to get enhancements. So you almost have to look at a holistic approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And say, okay, what are the critical security features you got to take care of? What are the critical infrastructures that you must take care of, and then you must also build features and functionality on your products and applications too, right? It's got to look at a holistic approach.
Being a CIO and CTO at the same time, like
Yeah,
mixing the role, you can
yeah,
choose from what path to take at the moment, but you need to to focus on something. And I have a bunch of questions like or where you can select or some of the strategies. So if you have an option to generate more revenue, or focus on something that will optimize cost through the technology, so what will you choose?
Good question. It depends on where the organization wants to go, right? Um, some organizations want to just revenue, right? And they want to get a certain type of evaluation, or they want to raise a stock price, or for whatever reason, there are companies out there that just want to hyper focus on revenue. They don't care about the cost, they don't care about the optimization, they don't care about the efficiency, because they want to, for the market, look at X amount, because certain evaluations are just done X basic on revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when that's the case, then the CIO has to get aligned to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there are certain organizations that look at profit, right? When you look at profit, you look at revenue minus cost, right?
Yes.
Minus cost, right? So I don't usually dictate that as a CIO or CTO. I usually fall in line with where the organization wants to go, and then I support that model. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so as a CIO, CTO, I don't dictate that. I usually get I usually get that from the CEO or the organization, or where they want to go. Where's their trajectory? Because they have different goals. When the organization will have different goals, if it's just for revenue or for profit, which is minus revenue minus optimization costs and stuff like that, right? So I can support both models, right?
Okay.
Um, because they come with a different mindset, right? The revenue model is making sure that our infrastructures can scale quickly. I have
Mm-hmm.
more infrastructure than I need. I have reserves on resources and stuff like that, so I can just turn on revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not looking at optimization. But then when it's profit, right, I'm looking at
Mm-hmm.
optimization. I'm looking at what's the best way to spend that $1, right? Because at the end of the day, it's profit that I'm looking at, not just revenue.
So if choosing between improving the user experience or improving IT infrastructure.
I would say the experience, right, hands down, is important, because the infrastructure will, if you have a strong infrastructure, the experience will be better. If you have a weak infrastructure, your experience is going to be bad, right? So
Okay.
um, and with end user experience, it's not just infrastructure, it's also how the application is tuned, how the flow works, right, of the application, how the processes are designed, right? So I encompass end user experience way more encompassing than just the infrastructure piece, because the infrastructure piece is
Okay.
just one small piece in the puzzle.
If you have an option to remove the technical debt or focus on removing the compliance burden.
Compliance will again trump tech debt, because compliance has, again, just the
Mm-hmm.
one component of tech debt, right?
Okay.
So compliance could be like making sure the access is limited, but has nothing to do with tech debt, right? End of life
Okay.
and
Yes.
support, right? So but compliance also making sure that you're not end of life or end of support too, right? So again, I think compliance is a lot more overarching. And as an organization, you should have very good documented compliance procedures and policies in place, right? And in that, then you basically have tech debt, and making sure end of life, end of support is taken care of, part of that compliance policy, right? So yeah, definitely I would focus on the compliance aspect. And that again comes with PCI compliance, data integrity, PI, all that stuff, right? It has more to do than just tech debt.
Let's say you have 50 software engineers,
Yeah.
and according to, to implement the product roadmap, you need to add another 50 engineers in short period of time. So what would be your strategy here, from the hiring perspective, from the team structuring perspective? So what would be the key challenges that you need to address here?
What's the span of time that I need to bring on those 50 engineers? So,
Let's say it's 1 quarter.
okay. I have an interesting story at AIG.
Okay.
we were doing a BPO, right, business process offshore, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to build out a 200-man, 300-man team, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
were actually just building a development team and an operations team, and I was like, okay, so I started hiring people in Manila,
Okay.
and my manager's like, a month go by, 2 months go by, and he's like, so how many have you hired? And the target was I think 300-400 people. I was like, yeah, I hired, and he was the goal was I think to do it within 3-4 months. And after a month, he's like, how many did you hire? And it's like, I got 4 or 5 done.
Okay.
I was like, oh my God, this is gonna take
Okay.
forever. So, um, and this is where mentors are important, because they've
Mm-hmm.
done it before. They've done this stuff before. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? Why don't you go out and hire a strong, strong CIO or CTO or a managing director or a director level or a VP level, right? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So I hired a
Okay.
very strong VP from, I think it was like from one of the big five or big six
Mm-hmm.
consulting groups, right? As soon as I did that, he knew like 10 other engineers, 15, 20, 30, 40 other engineers, right? And really good ones. Um,
Okay.
so I learned if I want to build a 50-man team, right, I got to get a senior manager, senior director. Like I have a good network and I can pull these people in and build this team. But however, if I get a couple of strong managers or directors, they'll be able to pull in other strong engineers, right? Um, However, at the same time, so making sure that you bring in a couple of top level people, and then they'll be able to build the underlying pinnings, right? That's one important thing. The other important thing is to making sure that your existing team is ready to train, this new team,
Mm-hmm.
right? So making sure that I lower their capacity or lower, making sure the organization knows that to ramp up these new people, I got to cross train or knowledge train, right? So being
Mm-hmm.
aware of that also, right? And then making sure the existing team is not affected with this new team, like what's going to happen with their careers and where's their career trajectory with this new team, right? So you got to address all those dynamics too. What about the
Mm-hmm.
senior directors, engineers, managers on the existing team? How are they going to feel? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of complexities, a lot of dynamics you got to deal with, right? How are you going to divvy up the products? How are you going to divvy up the teams? How are you going to how is the scrums going to look like, right? So um yeah, so a lot of lessons learned there, right? And a lot of it's an easy thing to say, oh, go get 50 engineers, but there's a lot of different complexities. You're aware of that, like I've done those many times over and over again, right, at different organizations. You got to be cognizant, and you want to maybe look at partners too out there, vendor
Mm-hmm.
partners who can maybe, if you just need 50 engineers for the next 6 months to build that product, maybe you don't want to hire
Mm-hmm.
permanent people. You want to just get a partner to maybe partner with, that have a bench strength that can help you build those products, right? So it depends on how quickly, what your long-term strategy is. Is it a short-term strategy? Get your existing teams ready. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, right? So
There is also another strategy, maybe like to acquire another company. And I have seen this multiple times. In many cases, the story is when you acquire a company and deal is done and money is transferred. So actually, the real game begins for the technology team. Yeah, maybe you can share maybe some major challenges that you have experienced after the post-acquisition integrations from the technology team perspective.
depends on the organization, again's appetite, right? There's certain organizations that have term sheets or M&As that are saying, okay, it has to be done in 3 months. That's it, and you have no
Mm-hmm.
budget, basically, right? When
Mm-hmm.
they say you have 3 months, no budget, then there's very little you can do, right? Basically, you amalgamate the technologies or just bring them on, and you bring on the people to support that technology. That's your worst scenario, right? Your
Yeah.
best scenario is you have enough time, you have a budget to actually decide where the target technology is going to be, and the target application and the target going to be, right? Um, and hopefully your tech stack is going to be one target, right? When you don't have a budget, when you don't have timelines, your tech stack doubles, triples, whatever, your people double, triple, whatever that, however big the acquisition is, right? Hopefully you can partner with the CEO and the executives to be able to say, okay, we're going to make sure when we do an M&A, we're going to have one target stack, one target application, one target process, right? If possible. Hopefully you can do that within 90-95%, right? I've been at multiple organizations where I have been able to target one tech stack, one application, for that process or for the end user products and stuff like that. But I also have been at, organizations where they're like, nope, we have a month, 2 months, we're not giving you any money, just
Okay.
right? So, but when you do that, then your long-term costs go through the roof, right? Your customer experience doesn't get good. You have customers now going through multiple hoops on applications. You have, technology groups who are just Java or .NET or Oracle or SQL Server, and your tech stack's all over the place, right? And it just becomes, what happens is the company then becomes burdened with more tech debt, because now there's more different types of technologies to maintain and upkeep, right? So the ongoing
Yeah.
maintenance of that just becomes very burdensome, right? So it's either pay
Yes.
me now or pay me later, right? Pay me now basically means, okay, you got the merger and acquisition done quickly, but then you got to pay it later, right? But if you pay me
Yeah, that's it.
if you pay me now and say, give me the money now, give me the time now to rationalize that, then you don't have to pay me later, right? So you got to pay me
Mhm.
sometime. Either pay me now or you pay me later, or don't pay me now, you pay me later, right? So, so the organizations need to think that way, right? If it's a long game, long strategy, merger and acquisition, then I would say, or I would highly tell the CIO or CTO, try to convince this CEO or the board to kind of make the bite or the fix the problem at the beginning, right? Go to a single tech stack, go to a single application, merge the applications, right? Because later when people have gone, it actually costs you twice as probably more, right? So if you pay me now, it's going to actually be less than what you're going to pay me in the future, right? So
Yes, yes. And
uh,
also, I think that, the cultural alignment between the boss teams is very important, and probably this should be, assessed from the very beginning, even before the acquisition is done,
yeah.
how the cultural alignment will be done between boss teams so that the integration will go smoothly.
Yeah. Because I had a couple of groups who were doing waterfall and other groups that were doing agile, right? And that's a total different mentality, right? From a
Hmm.
cultural perspective, right? And now when you're doing a merger with a waterfall group, and now you have an agile group, like that cultural shift takes a while to do, right? Um,
Yes.
and yeah, and both sides are not happy, right? They're like,
Yeah.
left waterfall like 10 years ago, and these guys are still doing it, but these guys, that's all they know, and you got to be patient and get, so yeah, the cultural fit has to also match. You're right.
I also think, that the partnership between technological and executive team is very important. As I understand, you have also the great experience building that kind of partnerships, between technology team and executive team. Yeah, but sometimes executive teams, they don't understand what's going on with the technology team. So what do you think from your experience? So what are the biggest pains of the technology team that are not understood pretty well by the business executives?
I think the whole cloud environment has shifted a lot of executives' minds. Like, standing up a server, they think it's just a click of the button, or things seem very simple, right? Oh, you can set up an email in 2 seconds, using Gmail. Like, why does it take so long setting up an Exchange server, right, in the cloud or whatever, right? So, um, helping executives understand the complexities around, the technology that supports their business applications, that's challenging, right? um, at certain organizations I had 400 subnets, thousands of servers, each on different OSs and different databases, and 30, 40 locations with 30, 40 circuits at each location, different types of development groups, hundreds of product lines, right? And then you start adding all the permutation combinations and making sure we stay up 99.99% uptime, regulatories up my butt, um, you add all that up, it becomes very challenging, very quick, very fast, right? And
Yes.
making a marketing person or a chief financial officer or CEO understand that complexity, can be challenging, right?
Yes.
And being able to somehow communicate those complexities and challenges in an effective manner is not always the easiest way.
But what do you think is the biggest profit for technology team if you establish a good level of communication and understanding with this C-level suite?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The benefit of that is faster implementation times, faster product development, faster, you know, there's when the other C levels understand the complexities or the challenges, then it becomes easier to get approvals for, if you're doing the tech debt or security updates or doing changes in the system, right? So, if a CIO, CTO is not successful in that, then it becomes very challenging for the rest of the organization to move forward the technology that needs to be done for the customers and the clients. So the better the CIO, CTO have that communication and understanding across other C levels and senior executives, that makes um, making products easier, making compliance easier, making finance budgeting easier. So a lot of the pieces fall in place once you do
Yeah.
have great communication and understanding.
Yes. Maybe my last question. So what do you think will be the maybe one or two major things for CTO of fintech companies, to focus on during the next 1 or 2 years? So what are the biggest trends or challenges you need to be aware about?
I guess your competition, right? Your competition, because like it's very easy and to know the products and services, and making sure that so alignment with the business and making sure that I think a CIO, CTO is very successful if they understand their customers and business models and targets. I think that's going to be the challenge, right? To
Mm-hmm.
understand your competitors, because there's a lot of people able to stand up products and services really quickly, and making sure that you have a marketability for your product and services, right? Once you have that, then doing it from a technological perspective is relatively easy. I think the biggest challenge the CIO, CTO are going to have is making sure you build the right products and service for your customers. Customers could be internally too, right? Or externally. And I think that's going to continue to be our biggest challenge and our alignment with that. I don't think it's going to be, security is going to be another thing. I think, because it's just constantly it's coming at all different vectors, right? So I think that's also another big challenge for a CIO, CTO. But I think the majority is going to be understanding your product market segment, right? And making sure you're building those right things for the right people. So I think if you get that, then it's all gravy from there.
And it's very important for the CTO and CEO to have the good level of energy. So how do you fulfill your energy to have enough through the day?
Yeah, so like you, Vassal, I love running. So this morning, um, there was this audiobook I was listening to, and it was about the 5 a.m. executive success, right? So, like I get up very early, 5 a.m. from 6 a.m. I go for a run along the beach or, at the gym or out around, around where I live. And it just builds the endorphins, right? Builds those energy and making sure that, the energy early in the morning is great too. So I
Yes.
like to get outdoor and get some run in and build my endorphins and get my energy from that. And then surrounding yourself with a great team, right? Making sure you build teams and you have coworkers that you love to work with, right? And then you have fun doing it, because at the end of the day, we gotta have fun while we're doing all this, right? If we're not doing it for fun, then it actually feels like work.
So I think that's it. So Ram, thank you very much for being with us today, and it was a really pleasure talking with you. So it was
Like what?
our Fintech CTO podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your guys' time and love.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also to all our listeners, so please subscribe to our channel and also like this video. And also don't forget to provide any kind of feedback. And what do you think about the topics that we have discussed today? And stay tuned, stay healthy, and see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye, guys.